On. We have a really exciting event for you all tonight. I'm really excited to be here. So thank you so much for getting on. Tonight is a Zoom town hall with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the Housing Justice for All movement. So before we get started, I just want to remind people once again that we're going to be using the Q&A function at the end of the event. So please put your name, your neighborhood in the chat so we can call on you. And don't forget to put your neighborhood. So we have a great event for you tonight. We're going to hear from the Congresswoman in addition to leaders in the Housing Justice for All movement. We're a statewide coalition of over 70 organizations across New York that are fighting to end homelessness, invest in public housing, and strengthen tenants' rights. In 2019, we came together to fight to strengthen and expand rent control in New York State. We were successful in ushering in some of the strongest tenant protections in New York's recent history and some of the strongest tenant protections in the country. So that's some of who you are going to hear from today. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez really propelled us to victory. Not only did she lend her advocacy to our campaign, her election to Congress helped millions and millions of people in our state believe in politics again. Thanks to her, we were able to pass some of the most progressive housing policy in modern history because she showed us it was possible to win big without real estate money, that we could push the machine out of politics and they were not invincible. And she inspired young progressives and socialists to come and take back the state Senate and let Albany politicians know that they have to be on the side of housing as a human right and on the side of the tenant movement. I'm so thankful because our fight is really just beginning. COVID-19 is making visible to everyone what those in the housing movement have known forever. We are really just one life event, a medical emergency, or a loss of job away from an eviction. Our homes are so fragile, a reality that 92,000 homeless New Yorkers know all too well. And under COVID-19, we're fighting to really transform our housing system so that we can serve the people and not serve corporate landlords. We have three demands. Our first is that we're fighting to cancel rent, mortgages, and utilities unite for everybody. And the burden of proof shouldn't be on the tenant to have to prove they lost income. Corporate landlords should take the hit. Corporate landlords who have sucked billions out of our communities for decades. But we know small property owners need support too, so we're calling for a hardship so mom and pop landlords get by. We're fighting to freeze rents and for the universal right to renew your lease. Too many tenants live without basic protection and are facing price gouging at a time of deep, deep uncertainty. We need good cause eviction and no rent increases. And finally, and most critically, we're fighting to reclaim our homes. That means that we have to use this moment to both urgently and permanently rehouse 92,000 homeless New Yorkers using any means necessary, including hotels. And we need to expand social housing and public housing across our state. This moment is really terrifying, but it's also quite inspiring. It's in moments of crisis that we're able to win big things, from the first rent control laws in New York State's history about 100 years ago to public housing and more. And it's in moments like these when we can really push the envelope to envision a totally different world. So I think I speak for many in the housing justice movement when I say that we don't want to go back to the world that we lived in before COVID-19. That was a world that had 92,000 homeless New Yorkers. It was a world that had deep housing on affordability, unsafe living conditions in our public housing. We don't want to go back to that world. We want to use this moment to fight for more. And as hundreds of thousands of people are turning to the housing movement to take action, I really do believe that we're going to win. So tonight, we're going to hear from some of those leaders in the housing justice movement. But before we get into that, I am really honored and excited to introduce Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez to you.
No, of course. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our advocates and our organizers that we are soon going to be hearing from, whether it's Woodside on the Move, Vocal, New York Communities for Change, and of course, the Housing Justice for All Coalition. I just want to thank each and every one of you all for joining us, because you all are leading this fight when it comes to housing. And it is such an important fight that we have, and we know right now, especially with the pandemic, with COVID-19, that housing is one of, if not the biggest stress point that and crisis point that working families are now encountering as a result of this shock to our economy. 20 million more people have gone and are now enduring unemployment in the time since COVID-19 hit. That's 20 million on top of the millions of people that have already been enduring or recovering from unemployment prior to the pandemic. And what that means is that there are now millions of people who don't know how they're going to continue paying their rent. They don't know how they're going to continue making their mortgage payments, and they don't know how they're going to continue making sure that they can afford to live. And right now, in a time when so many people are whose lives are threatened by a pandemic, their lives shouldn't also be threatened by the fear of eviction, by the fear of foreclosure, or worse, and just general displacement. But I also think it's important for us to talk about the fact that housing has been a public health issue since before this pandemic as well. When we talk to our nurses, when we talk to our wonderful, amazing nurses here in the Bronx and in Queens, many of them organizing with the Nurses Union, our nurses have also been fighting for housing policy as well. And why is that? Because housing is one of the number one social indicators of your health. If you go through displacement, if you are evicted, if you are foreclosed on, and you don't know where to go, it can have an enormous health toll on yourself. It creates kind of a perfect storm of conditions of insecurity that contribute to a lot of health issues. And so housing was an enormous social indicator of health status since before this pandemic. And now that, again, just like many other issues, is being exacerbated and exaggerated and really increased in the face of COVID-19. And so what do we need to do to make sure that we actually help real people? And that goes for renters, but it also goes for mom and pop landlords. One of the first things that we talk about, which is our first demand, is rent cancellation. And oftentimes the first reaction is, what about the landlords? What about people with mortgages? What about, mom and pops? And I think it's important to recognize the fact that there are some folks that have, that are mom and pop landlords that own maybe one home and that they rent out to tenants. But the thing is that there's a huge difference between that and a commercial landlord that owns a huge luxury condominium with tons of people, or even just any that owns a huge building with tons of units that's hiking up rent on all of their tenants. So first of all, that's an important distinction. The second thing that we're fighting for, though, is mortgage suspension as well. On the federal level, we need to make sure that mortgages and rent are completely taken care of so that there is no excuse for a person being removed from their home. There is no reason, and we need to remove all rationale for evicting a person, especially during a time of a pandemic. So we need to make sure that we're taking very clear federal action to suspend both mortgage and rent payments in this time. And it's actually, when you think about how this is structured, it's not hard. One thing that you can do is just suspend mortgage payments. Like, here's the path to canceling rent. We're going to lay it out right here. And here's just one path of canceling rent. There's a couple of ways that we can go about this, but here's one very clear way. One way that we can cancel rent is to suspend mortgage payments for the cancellation period. Let's say we want to start with 3 months. Suspend mortgage payments for 3 months. Tack that on to the end of the repayment period So let's say you have a 10-year mortgage, just suspend it for 3 months and make it a 10-year and 3-month mortgage so that you just make 3 additional payments at the very end. Now, what that allows you to do is it opens up the time, and you can take that suspension time to cancel rent, to make sure that we cancel the rent of any tenants in that building. They don't have to pay it back, and it does not create an additional financial liability on that landlord. So that's a very broad stroke way. Of course, there are other issues that we'll have to address, like property taxes and other issues. But if you have been collecting rent up until this time, then it also means that we can figure this out. We can figure it out. But right now, the question is not, can we get it done? And sorry if you hear the sirens in the background, everybody. I'm in the Bronx, and unfortunately, we're hearing these all day. But what we can do is that, and rather what our issue is right now is not that it's impossible to do. And it's not that we can't do it. It's that we lack enough politicians with the political will to actually help people who are tenants and to actually help people who are mom and pop landlords. We're seeing that with PPP. We're seeing that with all of these relief programs. You know, there's been relief package after relief package. We've passed almost about 4 different pieces of legislation related to coronavirus relief. And you wouldn't know that, would you? Because those 4 pieces of legislation are not being felt by everyday people as much as they need to be. So what we need to do is that with this legislation, it's being overwhelmingly slanted to the wealthy. It's being overwhelmingly slanted to the people who need help the least. And we need to turn that around to make sure that we are actually focused in not compromising on making sure that we are delivering results on the people who need it the most. And so with that, I yield back.
Thank you. So next, we're going to hear from Jasmine Sanchez, who's a leader in public housing and a member of Team AOC.
Oh, Jasmine's muted.
Look, we lost you, Jasmine. Oh,
do you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Sia. As she mentioned, my name is Jasmine Sanchez, and I am a lifelong resident of Baruch Houses on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. We are the second largest NYCHA development citywide with close to 9,000 residents. I am also the NYCHA organizer for the re-election campaign of Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And I want to thank Housing Justice for All and Rep. Ocasio-Cortez for hosting this meeting. It's important to create these spaces and have NYCHA residents participate because we are 1 in 15 New Yorkers. Our communities have been underfunded, under-resourced, and we are deemed as second-class citizens. So I thank the Congresswoman for prioritizing NYCHA, frontline and vulnerable communities, and putting us at the forefront of these conversations. Pre-COVID organizing for me looked like focusing on tenant repairs, civic engagement, HP actions, advocacy against development in NYCHA or the threat of development in NYCHA, and construction near or in NYCHA. Living at Baruch Houses means being exposed to constant environmental hazards. We sit on the East River, so when Sandy hit, the city was not prepared. And during Sandy, the city and NYCHA, they couldn't reach every household. They were unable to make these wellness checks, and they could not provide the necessary resources to every single household. And now we're seeing that again. We're seeing that with COVID-19, where we have less cleaning, less repairs, less communication. And while NYCHA states that they are communicating with residents, they are using methods that don't apply to all of the NYCHA residents. There are 600,000 of us. And using Twitter isn't going to reach everyone. Blasting numbers that are no longer working because folks had prepaid phones or Obama phones does not mean that you contacted these residents. And NYCHA's methods are outdated and they're not reaching the 600,000 people that they need to. We're facing an economic crisis. We're facing food insecurity. And quite frankly, a health disaster when we're told that we have to social distance and our elevators are out and you see people cramming in without PPE just to get home or to a store. This year, Cuomo again did not put any money into the budget for NYCHA, showing once again that NYCHA does not matter. And we need to put pressure on NYCHA. We need to put pressure on the state and also on HUD to come up with a strategic, strategy, because we are worth it and we matter. What I have been organizing around currently has been around rent forgiveness and a rent strike, obviously, but rent forgiveness for at least 3 months. And post-pandemic, all arrears must be forgiven. And currently, I am standing in solidarity with NYCHA residents citywide, and we're on rent strike. I've been on rent strike since April 1st, 2020, and I will continue to do so. And I'm just here to support everyone in this because we have to stand together. It's not about NYCHA and every other renter in New York. We have to stand as all of us being renters and calling for a mass action.
Thank you, Jasmine. And so next we're going to hear from Maria Segura from Woodside on the Move, and she's going to speak in Spanish. Ivan is going to translate. Maria is a leader in the Cosmopolitan Tenant Association, and she has organized hundreds of her neighbors to go on rent strike with her in this moment.
Okay. Buenas tardes. Buenas tardes, representante Alessandria Ocasio-Cortez y demás personas. Mi nombre es María Segura, soy líder de la organización comunitaria de Woodside on the Move, inquilina líder de la asociación de inquilinos de los edificios, del complejo de edificios de Cosmopolitan Asociación, que representan alrededor de más de 5,000 inquilinos, todos en su distrito. Representante Ocasio, le agradezco en nombre de la asociación por la labor que usted está haciendo para ayudar a la comunidad. Comunidad que es de su distrito. Comunidad a la cual ha sido afectada con la tasa más alta de mortandad por el COVID-19. Señorita representante Ocasio, siempre he sido directa con senadores, asambleístas, y he dicho las cosas como son. Yo soy una de las que he sido afectada por el COVID-19 y me he visto obligada a estar ausente de mi trabajo, el cual me ha hecho vulnerable en el poder pagar la renta. Y como yo, hay varios inquilinos de los que vivimos en los edificios de Cosmopolitan. Están siendo afectados por la misma situación. Por esta razón, nosotros, los inquilinos, nos hemos visto obligados a organizarnos para hacer una huelga el 1 de mayo. No quisiéramos hacerla, pero nos vemos obligados porque no tenemos de dónde pagar la renta. Le hemos pedido de todas las maneras al gobernador Cuomo que nos cancele la renta y él no ha hecho caso. Y esto está haciendo que nosotros, los inquilinos, adquiramos una deuda mucho mayor, el cual nos vemos obligados a no pagarla. Porque la mayoría de los inquilinos somos trabajadores que vivimos de un salario semanal. Y al acumularse este monto en la renta, no vamos a poder pagarla. Representante Ocasio, me gustaría hacerle un pedido. Necesitamos nosotros, los inquilinos, las organizaciones, que usted le dé un mensaje directamente al gobernador como que cancele la renta, un comunicado que sea directo y público, que él cancele la renta. Él no nos ha escuchado a nosotros, pero sabemos que a usted, si le manda este mensaje, él va a tener que responder. Señorita Ocasio, esto no es coincidencia en estos tiempos. Usted sabrá que la comunidad, mi comunidad, su comunidad, ha estado siendo maltratada, abusada, acosada por los caseros. Y lo que es más aún, ha sido apoyada y tolerada por los legisladores, al cual nosotros hemos depositado la confianza y hemos votado para que nos den el respaldo. Y hemos visto que nosotros depositamos la confianza, pero no hemos visto realmente resultados. Representante Ocasio, le están matando su comunidad. Nos estamos muriendo. Porque en el campo de la salud ya hemos visto que no dieron los recursos suficientes, nunca los han dado. Por eso su comunidad está muriendo. Le pedimos nosotros, las organizaciones, los inquilinos, sus votantes, que no permita que nos echen de nuestros apartamentos. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Iván.
Okay, can you guys hear me now? Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna interpret it for Maria. Thank you, Maria. Good evening. My name is Maria Segura. I'm a Woodside on the Move leader. I'm also a tenant leader of the Tenant Association at Cosmopolitan Building Complex, a tenant association representing more than 5,000 tenants, all in your district, Representative Ocasio-Cortez. I want to thank you on behalf of the Tenants Association for the work you are doing to help your community. The community that is, in fact, the most affected and with the highest mortality rate. Thank you for your work. I have always been a direct person, and I have seen things as they are. My community is dying. I'm a COVID-19 affected person, and for this reason, I was laid off from my job. This left me in a very vulnerable situation to pay my rent. And like me, several of the tenants who live in Cosmopolitan are in the same situation. For this reason, we decided to organize ourselves to hold a rent strike on May 1st. This is not because we wanted Representative Cortez. This is because we cannot pay. We have asked the Governor Cuomo to cancel the rent, but he has ignored us, and this is putting the tenants into a debt that they cannot pay. Representative, it's not a coincidence that this is happening. Just on this time that your community, my community, is being ignored and harassed by landlords. It's even worse when our representatives that we put into office play along with this, betraying our trust. As your constituent, I would like to say something directly. Your community is being killed. We are dying. And on behalf of tenants, we would like you to tell Governor Cuomo directly that he needs to cancel rent. He has not listened to us, but we know that if you send him this message public and directly, we will have to respond. On behalf of the tenants, I would like to ask for your support and also thank you again for the great work that you have done. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to remind the speakers to speak slowly for the Spanish interpreters and the transcribers. So I'm really honored to introduce the next speaker, who's a personal inspiration of mine, Winsome Pendergast from NYCC.
Hello, everyone. Am I being heard? Thank you, Ms. Cortez, for standing with us. My name is Winsome Pendergrass. I'm a member of the Housing Justice for All campaign, NYCC, and I presently live in Brownsville, which is one of the terrible hitting place that COVID has passed through. We, the tenants of New York, are calling for a rent strike come 1st of May. We are not going on strike because we won't pay, but because we can't pay. Hashtag cancel rent. Hashtag cancel mortgages. Tenants use 3 to 4 weeks of their paychecks to pay 1 month rent. So we could not save anything. We don't have a flush bank account lying around somewhere in the Cayman Islands or wherever else. We know we are going to be harassed, persecuted, shamed, and be hauled into court by the landlords. If you don't cancel rent outrightly, cancel the rent, God help us, for the landlords are going to turn on us like hyenas. Housing Justice for All want legislature to pass just housing law. We are calling on Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, to push with Representative Omar and you yourself, Ms. Cortez. We want to push the bill that is fair for the working class people of not only this state, but of this country. New York Homes Guarantee team work hard to write legislature with Representative Omar to cancel rent, and we need elected officials to stand up behind her. We need officials who will work with the committee to get things done. Governor Cuomo, things has changed. COVID-19 has changed everything. You can't do the same old thing. Change, Governor Cuomo. You can't do the same old thing with us. It's a brand new day. Tell the landlords they have to change. But Governor Cuomo, You have to stand up for us. You took an oath to stand up for your constituents. Our children are the future. Set the standard. Take them out of shelter. Governor Cuomo, be human. Be compassionate. Have a heart. We cannot pay unless it's with our blood. And how much blood do we have to give? We cannot pay. We would like you to cancel the rent and cancel the mortgages. If it's even up to the duration of COVID-19, then we won't have that baggage. We will never catch up, Governor Cuomo. I don't know who you're talking to. I don't know who is telling you that we can do it. But I think the mathematical equation still stands true. 0 from 0 leaves 0. In other words, nothing from nothing left nothing. We have nothing, zilch, nada, nothing left to pay the rent. I myself have not received a paycheck since the 1st of April. Where do you expect me to get it from to pay you? After this is over, I might have to start look 2 jobs to catch up. What about my health? Come on, Governor Cuomo. You can do better than that. But just in case you're not listening to us or you think you don't have to listen to us, notice, even though COVID is going on and we cannot go outside, we are organizing, we are united, we are pushing, and we are going to scream. You're soon to hear pots and pans beating and rocketing off the highest building in New York State. You better wise up, Governor Cuomo, because you're going to start something that you can't end. Come 1st of May, we can't pay. Not because we won't pay, but because we don't have it to pay. So I'm calling on all of the tenants, all tenants across the state of New York, within the 5 boroughs. Let's do it come 1st of May. Thank you.
Thanks, Winsome. And our last speaker is Joanza from Vocal New York. Joanza, take it away.
Thanks, Sia. First, I just want to say thank you so much to the Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and to the Housing Justice for All Coalition. And I'll be very brief and I'll be speak a little bit slow so translation goes smoothly. So again, my name is Joanza. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the director of organizing at Vocal New York. But I also have my own personal experiences with homelessness and working at Vocal New York for 20 years. We have worked at the intersection of public health and housing insecurity and homelessness. Our mission is to end AIDS epidemic in mass incarceration and homelessness and the drug war. And so we understand very clearly the connections between housing and public health. And I want to speak specifically about homelessness today. Though we're here to talk about canceling the rent, we have to also remember to keep in mind and center the needs and the experiences of people experiencing homelessness. What we found from how this pandemic is moving forward in New York State is that the people that are most vulnerable are people experiencing homelessness, people living in shelters where social distancing or physical distancing is virtually impossible, and also people that are living on the streets where basic hygiene becomes virtually impossible, especially as we look at the number of facilities that are closed that people experiencing homelessness would normally frequent to be able to keep themselves healthy and live decent lives. So I just want to speak to the fact that we're in a particular paradigm shift right now in this country, and especially in New York State. We have a homelessness crisis that rivals the Great Depression. And now we have a public health and economic situation that rivals the Great Depression. This is a time where people are going to look back at what we did, what leadership did to make sure that Americans, that people living in this country were able to stay in their housing and be safe. So today is the time for us to act, and not only to respond to the COVID-19 crisis to contain it, but to make sure that housing is a human right, to make sure that we have plans in this state to rehouse the nearly 100,000 people across New York State tomorrow. And right now, the immediate response so that we can contain and flatten the curve of COVID-19 in New York State, we need to make sure that across this state, that every person that is living in a shelter, every person that is living on the streets, that they are able to be put into immediate hotel rooms. Like in New York City, for instance, there's over 100,000 vacant hotel rooms. We've asked the city for 30,000 of those rooms. So what we're saying is that the state of New York and the country needs to make sure that people experiencing homelessness are able to get into a situation where they're able to be socially distant or physically distant so that they cannot contract this virus or spread it along. And you know what, while we're at it, when we're thinking about workplace, protections and workplace needs and changes in this time, like there's 98% of hotel union workers are laid off right now. We can put people experiencing homelessness into those hotels, and we can have those folks back in the workforce so that we can help our economy in New York State, and we can flatten the curve, and we can move our elected officials and our public consciousness to understand that the most vulnerable people when it comes to housing are those experiencing homelessness. When we build policy, when we construct our path forward, centering those people with those experiences and hearing those folks and looking to their leadership, like New York City's homeless union or Rochester's homeless union, then we're able to create the kind of policies that uplift everyone and raise all boats. And that's what housing as a human right looks like. And that's what we're doing right now with the Housing Justice for All Coalition at Voco New York. And thankfully so much to Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Joanza, so much. So we're going to give it back to Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. Thank you.
Of course, and thank you again to all of our advocates. Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, Winsome, Joanza, Maria. Thank you, everybody, from the Housing for All Coalition, and making sure that we fight for these priorities. And I think it's just really important to communicate that these things don't happen magically. They happen when we organize, and they happen when we fight for them. And that doesn't even fight along partisan lines. We have to, as we know here in New York, we have to fight with Democrats in order to make sure that these things get accomplished. And I think sometimes that's the big, nationally it's seen as a scandal to call out Democrats, but we're here in the state of New York. We have a Democratic governor. We have a Democratic state legislature. We have a Democratic city council, and we are still struggling to cancel rent. It's unacceptable. And so for that, we need to make sure that we are putting the heat on, because money in politics is not unique to the Republican Party. Money in politics also has a corrosive and corrupting influence in Democratic Party politics as well. That's why we got to call it out. That's why we have to push for rent and mortgage moratoriums, because as we all know, it's like this parable where people act, and a lot of these conservatives, they act as though money trickles down. And we know that that's a myth, but let's get one thing really straight. Money doesn't trickle down, but despair does. Because over and over again, the richest and the wealthiest people are shielded when a huge crisis hits our country. And then it's the people below them that feel it more, and the people below them that feel it more as well. And there's no other place where we can see that the most right here in housing, because here we have the bankers, and we have the hedge funds, and we have these huge real estate developers, right? They benefited from this $4 trillion relief package. They were able to get their little tax loopholes written in this most recent care package so that real estate developers can rake in millions of dollars from a coronavirus relief package. So they actually ended up with that package up. They ended up on it. They have benefited from this crisis. But then you take it down one step, right? Then you look at these mom and pop landlords. Now, a lot of them have tenants that are unable to pay rent, but they don't get to benefit from these huge kind of big bank bailouts, right? And so now they are feeling a squeeze in this moment. But as we know, owning real estate, owning property is also an aspect of wealth. So while they are in a tight point right now, they are still not experiencing the deepest of the deepest terrors of this crisis, which are tenants and single family homeowners, where the only thing that you are paying a mortgage on is the house that you live in. So it's the people who are paying rent and the people who are paying mortgages and people who do not have a second property that are terrified of being evicted, that are terrified of being foreclosed on and kicked out in the streets. And so as we see, once again, this pandemic hits and the banks and the hedge funds are protected, and they even get little sweetener deals. And then everyday working people and people trying to just make things, make it by, are the ones that are feeling the brunt of this crisis. So it's no surprise that we're seeing things pan out this way, but we also have to make sure that we are calling out elected officials that are not doing anything about it. Because here's the deal. This is a choice. Mass unemployment in the United States was a choice. We had policy options in front of us, and we could have guaranteed payrolls in the United States of America to prevent any person from losing their job due to coronavirus. And what did elected officials do? What did Mitch McConnell do? What did Donald Trump do? They chose not to do that. So these are not things that happen by accident. Unemployment is not happening by accident. If we face this precipice of mass evictions and foreclosures, that is not an accident. It is a plan. And we have to interrupt that plan. We have to interject in that plan. And that comes with ratcheting up political pressure. It comes with organizing. And the thing is, when it comes to these rent strikes, to echo what each and every one of you have said, is that people aren't striking because they don't feel like paying rent. People are striking because they can't pay rent. They can't. It doesn't matter how many threatening text messages a landlord or a building sends to their tenants. It doesn't matter how much you threaten legal action. It doesn't matter how much you intimidate anybody. People can't pay. You cannot coerce someone into doing something that they cannot do. There is no money in the bank. People need to feed their kids. We cannot be evicting. We need to be making sure that we are passing policy that allows people to stay in their homes. That is what we have to do. Now, there were a couple of requests made of me from our advocates, and I want you to let you all know that I will happily and gladly comply with those requests. As what Maria had asked of Woodside on the Move, for us to pressure and ask Governor Cuomo for a rent cancellation. I can let you all know, privately, I have had personal conversations with the governor asking him to do this. I have had them by phone. We've had them with our policy teams. And so if the next step is to now escalate and make these requests publicly, I am fine doing that because I've picked up the phone. We've had these meetings, and we need to make sure that rent cancellation happens on the state and federal level. Now, that's in terms of state action. In terms of federal action, I think one of the things that was also requested is that we co-sponsor Representative Ilhan Omar's bill. I believe we're already co-sponsored, but if we aren't, I'll double, triple check. But I can give you my assurances that we will be co-sponsored if I'm not already on the bill. So those are things that I'm happy to comply with. And when it comes to housing folks in hotels, I think this is something that is absolutely necessary. It was already just an enormous moral wrong that leading up to this crisis, we had more vacant apartments in New York City than we had people who did not have homes. So that we had more empty homes than we had homeless. And that applies to large portions of this country. And what that tells us, when there are more homes that are empty than there are people without homes, what that tells us is that our whole damn system is broken. The whole system is broken. It means that we are prioritizing greed and profit and asset prices over human life and the right to live under a roof. Because we would not have an unprecedented housing crisis in New York City if it were not for the real estate lobby here in the city and in the state and in the country. We would not have a homelessness crisis at the level that we have had, unprecedented. Like, let's get one thing really straight. New York City, before coronavirus, was experiencing some of the highest rates of homelessness since the Great Depression. That is directly linked to the fact that we have speculated and boosted and boomed rent prices to some of the highest rates we have ever seen in history. Those two things are not just coincidences. When rent goes up, people get displaced. And every time we think that there's just no level and no limit to the amount of greed, when we think that for example, you look at some of these landlords and you look at some of these developers, when you purchase a building, that cost for you to purchase that building remains fixed. You have maintenance cost, but the actual, this is why people buy homes, right? Because it will give them a reliable payment, because your mortgages do not go up. If you get a fixed rate, they do not go up month after month, but rent, or year after year, rent is going up year after year. And so it makes no sense that we are squeezing people that already cannot afford to purchase their own home for more money than a person who already owns land and is a landowning member or a home owning member of our economy. It's wrong. And what this is doing is that it's just squeezing blood out of a rock. And there's no more left. There's no more left. And so for that, we have to call for federal rent and mortgage moratoriums. We have to call for a rent freeze. I cannot think of a single reason why rent should go up this next year. I can't think of almost a single reason, unless the reason you're providing is just profiteering. And right now in a pandemic, we should not be profiteering. We're talking about a second wave hitting in the fall. We're talking about the fact that we do not have a vaccine. We think there's going to be a vaccine in 18 months. We don't know. We don't know if it's going to be mass tested, mass available, how effective it will be. And as long as that's the case, we should not be raising rents on people right now, not with unprecedented unemployment, not with anything else. And the fact of the matter is, and this is where I think we have hope, is that the situation is that we are on the side of reality. We are on the side of real life. And so the question is not, will landlords be defaulting on their mortgages if we don't do anything? The question is when they default on their mortgages if we don't do anything. So we need to do something. We have to do something. Because again, just like we said, these are choices. If we do not protect tenants, if we do not protect people, everyday people, then we are barreling towards another economic crisis on top of another economic crisis. We have a choice, and leadership means making tough choices, because the easy choices are made by everybody else. And so our job is to do the hard thing. Our job is to do the unpopular thing. And I just want you all to know that when I go down and when I vote against these relief packages, it gives me no pleasure. I want to make sure that we are doing things that need to be done, but we also need to hold the line. And if we are not giving relief to tenants, and if we are not giving relief to everyday people, then we should not be supporting packages that help bankers and the wealthy and the rich and do little to nothing to everyday people and mom and pops. So with that, I kind of yield it back to House of Justice.
Thank you. So we do not have time to do any Q&A, so we are going to jump into our calls to action. So I think we're going to do a little screen share on these call to action. So the first call to action is going to come again from Congresswoman AOC.
Great. So again, what we need you all to do is to call your member of Congress in support of Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's bill to cancel rent and mortgage payments nationwide. Do not assume because a Democrat represents you that a Democrat is on this bill. Because once again, as we said, not all Democrats are the same. And it's really controversial for some reason to say that. It's controversial for some reason for us to talk about our distinctions. But the fact of the matter is, you can look up who is supporting this bill and who isn't. And if your member is a Democrat and they are not supporting this bill, you should call them and ask them to support the bill. If your member is a Republican and not supporting this bill, good luck. You should still call them to make your needs known. But as we know, Republicans are absolutely being abhorrent, and they are enabling and boosting a lot of the banks and big business in this crisis. So please make sure you contact your member of Congress, no matter who it is, and ask them to support Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's bill on rent and mortgage cancellation.
Great. And then our next call to action is specifically for residents of New York 14. We're doing a constituency survey. Can you share the slide? Yeah. So this is a constituency survey. We are trying to learn more about what's going on in New York 14. So if you are a constituent of New York 14, please fill out this survey so that the team can learn more about you. The bit.ly is bit.ly AOC April survey. So please make sure to fill this out if you live in the 14th Congressional District. And then our final call to action is for the last slide before we close out tonight. The final call to action is to call on Governor Cuomo to cancel the rent. So you can call on Governor Cuomo to cancel the rent by going to bit.ly HJ for A call Cuomo. If you go there with your phone, it gives you a little script. You can just click it and you can call him and you can let us know how the call went. And don't forget to take pictures with the hashtag cancel rent and put them on social media so that we all know we're not in this movement alone. If you can't pay the rent on May 1st, there are millions and millions of New Yorkers who are in your same situation. We heard from a lot of them tonight. You're not alone, and the housing justice movement is there for you. We welcome you into our movement. So please don't forget, call your congressperson, fill out the constituency survey, call Governor Cuomo and let us know how it goes. And we are looking forward to fighting together and winning because we don't have any other option. So I'm going to hand it back to the Congresswoman to close us out.
Well, once again, thank you to all of our advocates and all of our housing advocates here joining us on this call. Thank you to everyone that is tuning in and trying to figure out ways for us to mobilize. Because as we know, organizing is not just for elections. In fact, organizing for elections is just to allow us to get to this space where there are people who are movable. And so the real organizing is happening right now. The real organizing is happening around the issues and the advocacy. And don't let people, don't take no for an answer. There is no reason we cannot get this done. It's going to require help on the federal and state level. It's going to require ambitious and unprecedented policy. But guess what? In just insurmountable, in almost seemingly insurmountable and unprecedented times, in those unprecedented times, we need to create unprecedented solutions. That's the only way we solve these problems. And every time we respond to a crisis, an unprecedented crisis, with small incremental and inadequate solutions, people will die, people will be displaced, and we are neglecting our responsibility as elected officials. So please make sure you continue to push. Please make sure you continue on rent cancellation. When people tell you that this is not possible or unrealistic, just know that it's not true. It's entirely possible. The fixes are not that hard. The idea is just cutting the red tape to make it happen. And our elected officials easily and quickly and swiftly cut red tape for the most powerful and wealthy people in this country. For once, we can do it for working people and people working to get by. So with that, I wish you all the best of luck. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for listening to our advocates. And once again, if you are a constituent of New York 14, or if you're just tuning into this call, go back and take a look at our calls to action that we just reinforced. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.